I didn't shatter the glass in my hand. I didn't gasp. I didn't even blink. I just stood there, in the heavy shadow of the velvet drapes, becoming as still as the statues I spent my life restoring. I stood there long enough to understand not just where I was, but when I was. I was standing at the end of something, and the beginning of something else. The library door of the master estate was open just a fraction, perhaps an inch. A careless mistake for a man like Elias, who built his entire empire on the premise that he never made mistakes. From where I stood, nestled in the hallway alcove, the air smelled of old leather, polished mahogany, and the expensive smoky scent of the scotch Elias preferred when he was celebrating a victory. If I had stepped back just half a pace, the thick wool runner on the floor would have silenced my retreat. I could have gone back to the party upstairs. I could have gone back to being the woman everyone thought I was. But I didn't. I stayed still, my eyes focused on a dust mote dancing in the beam of light cutting through the hallway. Inside the room, the voices were low, intimate, the sound of men who think they own the world. "It's done," Elias said. His voice had that rich, resonant timbre that made voters trust him instinctively. The polls have stabilized. The family man angle is working better than we projected. There was the sound of liquid pouring into a glass. Then his campaign manager, Marcus, a man who smiled with his teeth but never his eyes, spoke. "And Clara, is she going to be a problem after the election? She's quiet, but quiet ones can be difficult." I felt a strange sensation in my chest. Not pain, not yet. It was more like a cold draft entering a warm room. I waited. I counted the beats of my own heart. 1, 2, 3. Elias laughed. It was a soft, dismissive sound. "Clara isn't a problem, Marcus. Clara is the solution. She's a restoration artist. She spends her life fixing broken things, painting over cracks, making old, damaged objects look pristine again. She thinks she's fixing me. As long as she believes she's saving my soul from the dirty world of politics, she'll stand by my side, smile at the cameras, and hold my hand." He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "She's not a wife, Marcus. She's the best varnish I could buy. She covers up the scratches. Once I take the seat, she can go back to her dusty workshop and play with her porcelain. I won't need her to speak. I just need her to stand there and look like forgiveness." I didn't feel the floor beneath my feet anymore. It was as if gravity had simply ceased to exist. I didn't cry. Tears are for when you lose something you can get back. I knew with a terrifying clarity that I wasn't losing Elias. I was losing the version of myself that had believed in him. I slowly lifted the glass of water to my lips and took a sip. It was warm. I swallowed it down. I needed to be hydrated. I needed to be lucid. To understand why I stood there paralyzed, you have to understand who I was before Elias. My name is Clara. I'm 34 years old. I work in the silence of a restoration studio in the city. My world is small, precise, and honest. I deal with gold leaf, with bonding agents, with solvents that strip away centuries of grime to reveal the truth underneath. I fix things. That is my nature. If I see a chip in a vase, my fingers itch to fill it. If I see a tear in a canvas, I want to mend it. Elias knew this. He studied it. We met 2 years ago at a charity auction. He had broken a glass, an accident, he said. He looked helpless, charmingly clumsy for a man in such a sharp suit. I stepped in to help. I told him it wasn't a tragedy. I told him broken things have more character. He looked at me then, with those intense, dark eyes, and said, "I think I'm a bit broken, Clara. Do you think I have character?" It was a line. I see that now. It was a script he had tested on a dozen others, but at the time, amidst the noise and the superficial glitter of the gala, it felt like a confession. It felt like intimacy. Our courtship wasn't wild. It was architectural. He built us up brick by brick. He didn't rush me physically. He rushed me emotionally. He told me about the pressure of his career, the sharks in the Senate, the loneliness of leadership. He painted a picture of himself as a noble man trying to do good in a bad world, a man who just needed a sanctuary. He told me I was his sanctuary. "When I'm with you," he would say, stroking my hair as we sat in my small paint-stained apartment, "the noise stops. You're so pure, Clara. You don't want anything from me." He was right. I didn't want his money. I didn't want his fame. I wanted to be the safe harbor. I wanted to be the person who understood him when no one else did. But slowly, the restoration project began, not on an antique, but on me. It started subtly. "That dress is lovely, Clara, but maybe something more structured for the dinner tonight. The press will be there. You know I love your passion for art, but maybe don't bore the donors with the details of solvents. Just tell them you make things beautiful. My mother thinks you're charming, but she worries you're too fragile. Let's show her you're strong. Stand straighter. Smile less often but with more purpose." I didn't see it as control. I saw it as partnership. I thought we were a team. He was the sword, and I was the shield. I polished my edges to fit his scabbard. I stopped talking about the things that mattered to me because I was too busy memorizing the names of his potential allies. I cut my hair because he said a shorter cut looked more serious. I stopped seeing my friends from the studio because he said they were distractions who didn't understand our life. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of his spotlight. And now, standing in that hallway, I realized the truth. I wasn't his partner. I was a prop. I was a human shield carefully curated to soften his sharp edges. The restoration artist wife. It played well in the papers. It suggested that Elias cared about history, about preservation, about care. It was all a lie. He didn't care about history. He only cared about the future. His future. I didn't confront him in the library. That would have been messy. That would have given him a chance to spin the story, to use his voice, that magnificent, lying voice, to convince me I had misunderstood. Instead, I turned around. I walked back down the hallway, placing my feet carefully on the runner. I went upstairs to the guest room where my things were kept. I sat on the edge of the bed. The house was full of people. The pre-wedding dinner was winding down. Laughter drifted up from the patio. I could hear my own mother laughing, a sound I hadn't heard in months because she was so intimidated by Elias's family. I looked at my hands. These hands had fixed a Ming vase that had been shattered into 50 pieces. These hands had restored a Renaissance portrait that had been slashed by a knife. I looked at them and realized they were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. A cold, quiet, white-hot rage. I had spent 2 years making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I had spent 2 years silencing my own voice so his could echo. And he called me varnish. I thought about leaving right then, just packing a bag, climbing out the window, and driving until the gas ran out. But that would be running. That would be the fragile Clara he expected, the Clara who disappeared. No, if he wanted a performance, I would give him the greatest performance of my life. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, dismantling the relationship in my mind. I took apart every memory, every compliment, every touch, and examined it under the harsh light of the truth I had just learned. I saw the manipulation in his gifts. I saw the strategy in his affection. I saw the calculation in his proposal, timed perfectly with a scandal involving his opponent. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, the colors of a bruise healing, I was empty. But it was a good emptiness. It was the emptiness of a room that has finally been cleared of clutter. I was ready. The morning was a blur of organized chaos. The machinery of a high-profile wedding is terrifying. It doesn't care how you feel. It only cares about the timeline. 6 a.m., the makeup team arrived. 3 women with brushes and sprays talking over my head as if I were a canvas.
She looks pale. We'll add more blush. The lighting in the cathedral is unforgiving. I sat in the chair and let them paint me. I watched in the mirror as they constructed Elias's wife. They covered my circles under my eyes. They contoured my cheekbones to look sharper, more aristocratic.
They glued lashes to my eyelids to make my gaze look doe-eyed and adoring. My mother came in. She was wearing a dress that cost more than her car, a gift from Elias. She looked nervous, happy, and oblivious. "Oh, Clara," she whispered, tears in her eyes, "you look like a princess. You've done so well, sweetheart. You've done so well." I wanted to shake her. I wanted to scream, "He bought us! He bought you with a dress and me with a dream." But I didn't. I just squeezed her hand. I couldn't take this away from her yet. Then came the dress. Custom-made silk, heavy, structural. It felt less like clothing and more like a cage. As the zipper went up, I felt the air leave my lungs. It was armor. But today, I wasn't wearing it to protect him. I was wearing it to survive the battle I was about to start. At 10 a.m., Elias sent a gift. A courier brought in a small velvet box. Inside was a necklace. Diamonds. Cold, hard, flawless. And a note. "To my muse, today we build the future. E." I stared at the note. Muse, another word for an object that inspires but does not speak. I put the necklace on. The metal was freezing against my skin. It felt like a collar. The drive to the venue was silent. I sat in the back of the vintage Rolls-Royce. My father sat next to me. He was a man of few words, a carpenter. He looked at me, really looked at me, and frowned. "You don't look happy, Clara," he said softly. "You look resolute." I turned to him. "Is there a difference, Dad?" He paused. "Resolution is what you need when you have to do something hard. Happiness is when you don't have to try." He knew. Somewhere, deep down, he knew. The venue was spectacular, a historic conservatory, walls of glass filled with white orchids, 500 guests, senators, CEOs, celebrities. The press was corralled at the back, lenses long and hungry. The music started. The string quartet played a piece Elias had chosen, something grand, something that sounded like a coronation. The doors opened. I saw him. He was standing at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome. He watched me walk down the aisle with a look of profound emotion. To everyone else, it looked like love. To me, it looked like satisfaction. He was looking at his poll numbers walking toward him in white silk. I walked. Step, step, step. I didn't rush. I didn't stumble. I focused on his eyes. I wanted him to see me, not the varnish. Me. When I reached him, he reached out for my hand. His grip was firm, possessive. He leaned in and whispered, "You look perfect." "I know," I whispered back. The officiant began the ceremony. He spoke about duty, about loyalty, about two souls merging into one purpose. Elias nodded solemnly at all the right parts. Then it was time for the vows. We had written our own. Elias went first. He pulled a card from his pocket. He cleared his throat. "Clara," he began, his voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone, "before I met you, the world was black and white. You brought color. You are the quiet in my storm. You are the gentle hand that guides me. I vow to protect you, to honor your grace, and to keep you safe in the sanctuary of our love. I vow to lead so you can rest." People wiped away tears. It was a masterpiece of political theater. He was the strong protector. I was the fragile treasure. Then it was my turn. I didn't have a card. I had memorized what I wanted to say in the darkness of the night before. I took a breath. The air smelled of expensive perfume and anticipation. "Elias," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the acoustic perfection of the conservatory, it carried. 2 years ago, you told me you were broken. You asked if I could fix you." He smiled, nodding encouragingly. He thought this was part of the script. "And for 2 years," I continued, "I sanded down my own edges to fit your cracks.
I painted over my own colors to match your palette. I thought I was restoring a masterpiece." I saw a flicker of confusion in his eyes, just a tiny twitch. "But yesterday," I said, "I realized something fundamental about my profession. You cannot restore something that is fake. You cannot fix a soul that isn't broken, but simply empty." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. The string quartet stopped shifting in their seats. The press stopped clicking their shutters. Elias's smile froze. He squeezed my hand hard, a warning. "Clara, you're nervous. Stop." I pulled my hand away, slowly, deliberately. "I'm not nervous, Elias. I'm awake." I turned to the crowd. I looked at his campaign manager, Marcus, whose face had gone pale. I looked at his mother. Then I looked back at him. "I heard you last night in the library. I heard you call me your varnish. I heard you say I was the solution to your polling members." A gasp rippled through the room. "You don't want a wife, Elias. You want a prop. You want a human shield to hide your ambition behind. You want someone to stand there and look like forgiveness so you never have to actually ask for it." Elias reached for me, panic finally breaking his mask. "Clara, please, you're having an episode. We can talk about this." "We are done talking," I said. "I am not your varnish, Elias. I am not your cover-up. I am the artist, and I am scrubbing this canvas clean." I reached up and unclasped the diamond necklace he had sent me that morning. It fell into my hand, heavy and cold. I dropped it on the altar. It made a sharp clack sound that echoed like a gunshot. Then I took off the engagement ring. I placed it next to the necklace. "Find another shield, Elias. This one is walking away." I turned around. The aisle seemed incredibly long, like a runway, but I didn't run. I walked. I could feel 500 pairs of eyes on my back. I could hear the rising murmur of shock, the frantic whispers of the campaign team trying to do damage control. I heard Elias call my name, but his voice sounded small. It sounded like a man who realized the statue had just stepped off the pedestal. I saw my father as I passed him. He was standing, and he was smiling, a fierce, proud smile. He nodded at me. I walked out of the glass doors. The fresh air hit me like a physical blow. Sweet, clean, real. I kicked off the heels that pinched my toes. I walked barefoot on the gravel driveway to the parking lot where my old sedan was parked, the one Elias hated because it was dumpy. I got in, I started the engine, and I drove. I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove out of the city, toward the coast. I rolled the windows down. The wind whipped my hair, the hair he made me cut, into my face. I tore the false lashes off my eyes. I wiped the contouring off my cheeks with the back of my hand. I cried then, not for him, but for the relief, the overwhelming, exhausting relief of not having to pretend anymore. The aftermath. It's been 6 months since that day. The scandal was immense, of course. The runaway bride, the papers called me. The meltdown at the altar. Elias's team tried to spin it. They released statements saying I had suffered a mental breakdown, that the pressure of the spotlight was too much for my fragile nature. But the thing about the truth is once it's out, it echoes. A video of my vows leaked. People saw my face. They heard my voice. They didn't see a crazy woman. They saw a woman breaking a chain. Elias lost the election. It turns out voters don't trust a man who can't even keep his own manufactured reality intact. Without his varnish, the cracks showed. He's working as a lobbyist now, somewhere in the shadows where he belongs. And me? I'm back in my studio. But things are different. I don't just fix things anymore. I create them. I bought a new kiln. I'm making ceramics, imperfect, jagged, beautiful things. I leave the cracks visible. I fill them with gold like the Japanese art of kintsugi. I celebrate the breaks. I'm dating someone new. He's a landscape architect. He has dirt under his fingernails and he talks too much about soil pH levels. When I told him about Elias, he didn't call me brave or fragile. He just said, "What a waste of time trying to polish a mirror when you could be looking out a window." I kept the short hair though. Turns out I like the way it feels when the wind hits my neck. I didn't leave Elias because I stopped loving the idea of us. I left because I finally started respecting the reality of me. We are told that love is about compromise, about making room for the other person, and that's true. But love is never, ever about making yourself disappear so the other person can be seen. If you are standing in a hallway right now, listening to a voice that makes you feel small, if you are wearing a costume that feels like a cage, if you are letting someone paint over your colors, take a breath, count to 3, and walk away. The curtain is yours to pull down, and the life waiting on the other side, it's messy, it's loud, it's unscripted, and it is magnificent. Thank you for listening.